This video discusses how Israel should deal with Hamas fighters who have surrendered or may be taken as prisoners of war. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. After the October 7, 2023 attack by Hamas on Israeli civilians, raping, brutalizing, mutilating women, beheading children, killing more than 1,200 elderly men, women, and children, and holding more than 240 hostages, Israel set out to completely rid the land of Hamas by killing all its fighters and removing it from power and destroying the organization to never rule Gaza again. Israel attacked Gaza and set out to destroy all the 20,000 to 30,000 Hamas fighters. Then some of the fighters surrendered. Immediately the thought came to my mind, I'm glad I don't have to make the decision about what to do with the fighters who've surrendered. Does Israel kill them all? If it does, it will be condemned by the rest of the world for violating the rules of war. If it puts them in jail and releases them after the war as part of a negotiated settlement, the fighters will certainly take up arms again to fight Israel. I thought it would be a no-win situation for Israel, no matter how it deals with those who have surrendered. Then I thought about the situation again. Though the decision may be a hard one, I cannot shirk from the task of making tough decisions. Therefore, I've decided to discuss the situation and give my opinion, or rather my judgment. The most important basis for making decisions is to confront the reality Israel is faced with. Can you imagine any world leader, even a German, Chinese, Iranian, Afghan, or a Palestinian leader, ever suggesting that the prisoners they take in war should be executed? Certainly, diplomat of any nation at the United Nations is not going to suggest that. It simply does not look good to take such a position, no matter what the prisoners did just prior to surrendering to their enemies, what views they hold about them, and what the declared intentions of their people are against their enemies, and what the history shows they are likely to do soon after they are set free. After all, they or their countries don't have to deal with the released fighters themselves. But they will not take that position if their country was faced with a similar situation as Israel has faced for the past more than 75 years. They know that the only right decision is to utterly destroy the enemy's army as a deterrent and not allow the enemy to build an army to threaten you again in the future. On December 12, 2023, member states in the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, as well as ensuring humanitarian access. It passed with a large majority of 153 in favor and 10 against, with 23 abstentions. The resolution also reiterated the General Assembly's demand that all parties comply with their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, notably with regard to the protection of civilians. Complying with international law would require that those who have surrendered not be harmed. Every nation and their diplomats want to look good in the eyes of the rest of the world. They want to be looked upon as humane and strict followers of rules of war. And it is easy to do when your own nation will not be impacted in any way, whether the prisoners are released or not, though it's clear to everyone from all past experiences that the Hamas fighters, once released, will again join their people's uncompromising efforts to destroy their enemy, the Jewish state of Israel. If you let them live and release them, they'll immediately take up arms to fight Israel, ready to rape women and slaughter babies again, take civilians as hostages, and kill as many Jews as they can. That is the situation Israel faces with Hamas fighters surrendering to Israel Defense Forces soldiers. Diplomats at the UN and leaders of nations do not face that reality. Therefore, they can make statements such as Israel must obey the rules of war as they look good to the world for taking such a quote unquote principled position. Let's look at what Israel faces when it fights Hamas. When they go into residential areas, Hamas fighters in houses and apartment buildings are firing at Israeli soldiers and killing them. Then what choice does Israel have? Should it allow its soldiers to be killed by Hamas fighters fighting from residential areas in order to save Palestinian civilians' lives? UN diplomats are foolish to not see the reality and vote on resolutions that make them look good, give every advantage to the Hamas fighters, and try to shackle Israeli soldiers in many ways. I am glad Israel is not foolish enough to fall for that. It's following the right policy to minimize its own casualties, even though it may require bombing to rubble residential buildings from which Hamas fighters are firing at Israeli soldiers, and even though Palestinian civilians are killed as collateral damage. Now, what is a Palestinian's ticket to a better life than the average Palestinian? We must face Palestinian reality. Besides the few who become professionals such as doctors, teachers, engineers, lawyers, etc., the only other incentives offered are salaries paid to fighters or get into politics and then siphon off aid money or control the rackets for smuggling goods through the tunnels between Egypt, which end is controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood, and Gaza, controlled completely by Hamas, and then impose taxes on those smuggled goods up to the tune of 20% and a flat fee of $2,000 for every carload. Then the families of those who have agitated against Israel or committed terrorist acts and are held in Israeli prisons or have been killed are paid monthly stipends. Those are the only incentives to improve one's life for young Palestinians. Here are some very interesting facts about Palestinians and Hamas on the Jerusalem Institute for Justice website, an organization recognized by the United Nations for its work on protecting human rights. According to a European Union report, the Palestinian Authority has not accounted for roughly $3.1 billion of aid money it received during 2008 to 2012. It's safe to assume that it's been distributed among the top Palestinian Authority leaders. A report by the World Bank found that 60% of the Palestinian population lives under the international poverty line of $2 per day or $60 per month. Unemployment rates in the West Bank and Gaza are about 30%. Rawabi, the Palestinian city funded by international donors, is nothing more than an empty hilltop today, a far cry from the 6 new housing projects advertised by the Palestinian Authority as being under construction in 2008. Over the course of 20 years since the Oslo Accords, the Palestinian Authority has breached its commitment by not building water purification and sanitation facilities, leading to a severe water shortage in the Palestinian areas. As a result, 12% of childhood deaths in Gaza are due to contaminated water. Corruption is rampant in Palestinian Authority-controlled industries. Monopolies have been created in commodities like cement, petrol, and flour, which means that Palestinian citizens are fleeced by being charged monopoly prices. For example, the Palestinian Authority-controlled General Petroleum Corporation is known to have sold gas mixed with kerosene to Palestinian citizens, enriching those at the top but harming citizens. Massive funds earmarked for improving general Palestinian welfare and infrastructure, between $70 to $100 million per annum, are diverted to pay terrorists who are sitting in Israeli jails. They are paid to carry out violent crimes against Israelis. For instance, those who have received up to 3 years in prison are paid $400 per month. For more serious crimes with at least 30 years in prison, they receive $3,400 per month from the Palestinian Authority. All of these payments come from international monetary aid. When Palestinian Authority leader Yasser Arafat died, his accountants found that he had stashed over $1.3 billion in hidden accounts in Switzerland, the Caribbean, and Egypt. His total fortune was estimated to be between 4.2 to $6.5 billion. Most of this money eventually ended up in the Palestinian Investment Fund. Today, the Palestinian Investment Fund is surrounded by allegations of favoritism and fraud. President Mahmoud Abbas, whose net worth is more than $100 million, is reported to have asserted complete control over the fund, filled its board with his cronies, and has rejected all attempts to audit its operations. His sons have enriched themselves with hundreds of thousands of dollars in U.S. aid contracts. Meanwhile, Hamas counts within its members about 1,700 millionaires. Hamas has invested in real estate projects in Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Dubai, and not in the territory it governs, which would have benefited ordinary Palestinians by providing them jobs. The estimated net worth of top Hamas leaders now living in Qatar, confirmed by U.S. Treasury officials, for Abu Marzouk, deputy chair of the Hamas Political Bureau, is $3 billion. For senior Hamas leaders Khalid Mashal, $4 to $5 billion, and for Ismail Haniyeh, $4 billion. Hamas is the second richest terror group in the world with an annual turnover of $1 billion for terrorist activities, second only to the Islamic State with a turnover of 2 to 3 billion times larger. Because of Palestinian Authority and Hamas policies, while top leaders have become very rich, majority of Palestinians live in dire poverty who are given financial incentives to participate in terror activities. Hatred for Jews is preached in Palestinian schools, and the citizens are made to believe that they are victims of Israeli policies which keep them in poverty. Despite what Hamas and Palestinian Authority leadership have done to their citizens, Israel is blamed for all that the average Palestinians are suffering. In 2019, former President Trump's senior advisor, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, proposed a $50 billion investment plan for Palestinians and neighboring nations, which he said would create 1 million jobs in Gaza and in the West Bank. It would bring down unemployment from 30% to single digits. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas rejected the plan, saying the economic situation should not be discussed before the political one. As long as there is no political solution, we do not deal with any economic solution. Hanan Ashrawi, a member of the Palestine Liberation Organization Executive Committee, said, "First, lift the siege in Gaza. Stop the Israeli theft of our land, resources, and funds. Give us our freedom of movement and control over our borders, airspace, and territorial waters, etc. Then watch us build a vibrant, prosperous economy as a free and sovereign people." With what the Palestinians are demanding, they will continue to make wars with Israel to destroy the Jewish state. That is the stated goal of Hamas. The question of who will control Gaza has been discussed when the war ends. Proposals are for the Palestinian Authority to take over with Hamas dead as an organization. But that's not the view of the Palestinian Authority leadership. In an interview with CBS News of America, PA Minister for Social Affairs Ahmed Majdalani said, "Maybe Israel can destroy Hamas military forces and capabilities, but it cannot destroy Hamas as an organization. Therefore, their plan for Gaza after the war ends would include an element of Hamas as a junior partner. Despite Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's insistence, Hamas must be completely destroyed." Now, following rules of war makes perfect sense when your enemy also adheres to rules of war. But when your enemy has never adhered to rules of war in its history, has no intention of adhering to them, and takes every advantage it can when you adhere to rules of war, you are giving your enemy opportunity after opportunity to survive and continue to fight against you to destroy you. That is the situation Israel faces as it fights Hamas. In their more than 75-year history, the Palestinians' goal has been to destroy the Jewish state of Israel by killing all Jews in Israel and establish a Palestinian state in the entire territory. Even as they continue to fight Israel after the October 7, 2023 attack, despite more than 10,000 civilian deaths as collateral damage because Hamas fighters embed themselves among civilians with their weapons to fight, the stated Hamas goal has not changed, which is to establish a Palestinian state in the entire land of Israel, including the West Bank and Gaza. The chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," meaning from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, that is regularly used at pro-Palestinian demonstrations across the world since the start of the Israel-Hamas war, is a call for the eradication of the Jewish state of Israel by exterminating or expelling the Jews. Besides the demonstrators using the phrase, even if some want to dispute its meaning, Hamas leaders have made it clear that even if the current war stops, there will be October 7th over and over again till their goal of erasing the Jewish state of Israel is achieved. That should leave absolutely no doubt in anyone's mind that if you free those Hamas fighters who have surrendered, they will immediately take up arms to fight Israel with no qualms about raping and killing Jewish women all over again, slaughtering infants and the elderly, taking and killing hostages, and put their full savagery on display again and again till they are dead or they have achieved their goal of extirpating the Jewish state of Israel. Does it not sound astoundingly foolish to keep giving them that opportunity again and again, especially after 75 years history of similar behavior? People all over the world are demonstrating because there have been a disproportionate number of Palestinian civilian deaths. Why isn't anyone in the world demonstrating that Hamas release all hostages they've taken? Whenever there is talk of restarting negotiations for release of hostages, Hamas leaders continue to reiterate that there will be no negotiations till the fighting is over. Palestinians have carried out terrorist acts against the Jews since the establishment of the Jewish state. Yet when Israel strikes back at them and kills a disproportionate number of them to deter further terrorism, they claim the status of victims of Israeli oppression. I've experienced some of the feelings of becoming victims of Palestinian terror when I visited Israel in October 1987 for 5 days. One is always fearful of being killed or maimed for life by a suicide bomber wearing a belt of explosives around his waist and blowing himself up near you. That's what Israelis feel most of the time, though life goes on. Hamas leaders have called for globalizing the Intifada or uprising and widespread violence against both Israelis and Jews across the globe. That has raised the threat level for violence against the Jews and in USA and British Commonwealth nations. Thus, the threat to the Jews and even Americans and Britons will remain as long as Palestinians hold on to their goals of destroying the state of Israel and establishing a Palestinian state from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Primary responsibility for the Israeli leadership is to protect its citizens from terrorism and violence and not necessarily be in the good books of diplomats at the United Nations or world leaders, many of whom will utter mealy-mouthed platitudes such as they obey all international rules and rules of war whereas their enemies, the Palestinians, have never obeyed them and have no intentions of ever obeying them. A nation cannot make decisions based on what other nations will say. American writer Ambrose Bierce defined diplomacy as the patriotic art of lying for one's country. In the case of Hamas-Israel war, diplomats will say things that will make their country look principled, even though it shackles one party, Israel, and allows the other party, Hamas, to prosecute the war any way it likes. Even though some diplomats will condemn Hamas's actions, none will offer material help to Israel to deal with threats from Hamas and the Palestinians. Israel has to deal with the problem on its own. Therefore, Israel must make decisions that are in its best interest and ignore protestations of diplomats that will impede its achieving its goals. Let me remind the world of another reality. Germany and China have built a global alliance to fight the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel to exterminate them as people and take over their lands. No mercy will be shown to them when they lose the war. If the Palestinians were to somehow succeed in their war with Israel, they will exterminate the Jews in Israel and establish their Palestinian state. That's reality. Therefore, in this current Hamas Israel conflict, Israel should stick to its goal, which is to utterly destroy men in arms of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and fighters in the West Bank, no matter what their affiliation. It makes no difference whether they surrender or not. They've already committed the atrocities. The judgment on them is death. Israel should not step back from that goal, no matter what criticism it faces from diplomats and world leaders. They don't have to face Palestinian terrorism. Israel has to live with that threat on a daily basis. The current Hamas Israel war will not be the end of the story. After Germany, China, and their allies start the Third World War, the Palestinians will certainly be part of that alliance. If the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel or UBI nations are initially successful, I have already rendered my judgment that two-thirds of Palestinians must be destroyed for having been a hammer in the hands of the Germans for the past 75 years to hammer us. But in the current conflict, Israel must adhere to its goal of killing all Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Palestinian Authority fighters and the top leaders who started the current conflict. It will perhaps increase the length of time Israel has from Palestinian terrorism. I will continue this discussion in part 2 of my video. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, how Bible prophecy is playing an important role in world affairs, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini to view and get information on the latest videos.